Okay, you've probably seen these things everywhere, right? These masks, these wands, all glowing with this intense red light. They're all promising this like futuristic way to get well. This is what's known as low-level laser therapy, or LLLT for short, and man, it has just exploded. It's gone from a science lab thing to something you can just buy for your house. So, let's get into it.
But what is it, really? I mean, the marketing for these gadgets is making some pretty wild claims. And that leads to the big question, the one we're all thinking. Is this a real medical breakthrough we're seeing? Or is it just, really, really good marketing for some expensive tech?
And the promises are, well, they're bold. They tell you it can erase your wrinkles.
Then they say it can regrow your hair. And get this, some even claim they can melt fat and change your body shape, no surgery required. I mean, come on, those are huge claims. So let's find out if the science actually backs any of this up. Okay, so let's push past all that marketing noise and really unpack the science here. Does any of this hold up to scrutiny? To figure that out, we've got to get to the bottom of how it's supposed to work.
So the big fancy scientific term for this whole process is photobiomodulation. I know, it's a mouthful, but the idea behind it is actually pretty simple. It's all about using very specific kinds of light to trigger biochemical changes inside our cells. And we're not talking about heat here. This isn't about burning anything. Think of it more like using light to send a very specific message to your cells.
Okay, take a look at this diagram. It shows exactly how different colors, or wavelengths, of light do different jobs. Now, don't get bogged down in all the little labels. The main thing to see here is that red and near-infrared light can travel deeper into the skin, down into that dermis layer. And that's where it can get to work on the cells that make things like collagen. But then you see the blue light? It hangs out right near the surface. That's why it's used for more surface-level problems, like the bacteria that can cause acne.
Probably the easiest way to wrap your head around this is to think of it like photosynthesis, but for your own cells. Seriously, plants use sunlight to make energy, right? Well, the theory here is that our cells can do something similar, use certain kinds of light to power up their own little engines.
And it all happens in this little three-step chain reaction. So first, the light gets soaked up by the mitochondria. You remember those from biology class? They're the powerhouses of the cell. Then, that absorption kicks the production of something called ATP into high gear. And ATP is basically the energy fuel for everything a cell does. So, with all this extra energy to burn, the cells can get to work doing their jobs better, like repairing tissue and dialing down inflammation.
Okay, so the theory sounds pretty solid, right? It makes sense, but does it actually work in the real world? Let's take a look at the clinical evidence for some of the biggest claims. And we'll start with something a lot of people deal with: pain.
Yeah, one of the most researched uses for this is treating knee osteoarthritis. It's a really common condition, causes a ton of chronic pain for millions of people.
And you know what? The evidence here is surprisingly strong. We're talking multiple studies, good ones, like randomized controlled trials and big meta-analyses. And they show that LLT really can reduce pain and help people move better if they have mild to moderate knee osteoarthritis. And it seems to work especially well when you pair it with physical therapy. But, and this is a really important but, here's the catch. The researchers themselves are quick to say that we just don't have enough data on the long-term benefits yet. And we really don't know if it works for severe cases of arthritis. So while it's definitely promising, it is absolutely not a miracle cure.
Okay, let's shift gears now to one of the biggest cosmetic claims out there: getting rid of acne.
And remember that diagram we looked at with the different colors of light? This is where that really comes into play. The idea here is to attack acne from two different angles. Use blue light with its shorter wavelength to kill the acne-causing bacteria sitting right on the skin's surface. And then use red light to go deeper to fight inflammation and maybe even help your skin produce less oil. But once again, when you look at the actual clinical trials, you start to see some pretty big limitations. A lot of the studies only follow people for a short time. They usually don't include anyone with really bad acne, and a lot of them don't even compare light therapy to the standard stuff we know works, like benzoyl peroxide. So the theory makes sense, but the proof just isn't quite there yet.
All right, let's keep going and look at two of the biggest claims you'll see in ads: fixing hair loss and melting fat. We're going to focus on hair loss first, because honestly, the evidence for fat loss is, well, it's pretty weak right now. It just doesn't have the same level of research behind it. I mean, the idea that you could just put on a glowing helmet and regrow your hair,
Incredibly appealing. And what's wild is that at first glance, the evidence actually looks pretty darn good.
In fact, there was this huge meta-analysis where they combined the results from 11 different high-quality trials. And what they found was, yeah, LLT seemed to actually work. It helped improve how thick and dense people's hair was for both men and women, and it had almost no side effects. I mean, sounds amazing, right? A total home run.
Well, hold on a second. Because when you dig just a little deeper into that same study, a massive red flag just pops right up. Get this, 9 out of the 11 studies they looked at were paid for by the companies that make the devices. And in 7 of those, 1 or more of the authors had a direct financial interest in the product they were testing. Now, that doesn't automatically mean the results are wrong, but wow, that is a huge potential for bias and you just can't ignore it.
So where does that leave us? What's the final takeaway? How are we, the consumers, supposed to figure all this out when it feels like the marketing hype is miles ahead of the actual solid science?
This really gets to the heart of the problem, and one researcher just nailed it when they said that with this tech, the challenge is to prove its therapeutic utility in retrospect. Basically, the products got to market so fast and became so popular that now the science is playing catch-up, trying to prove whether the claims that are already being made are actually true.
Okay, one last thing, and this is super important if you're thinking about buying one of these things. A lot of the best research, the really good studies, were done using actual lasers, but most of the devices you can buy online or in a store, they use LEDs. And they are not the same thing. A laser gives you this focused, coherent beam of light that might get deeper into your tissue. LEDs, on the other hand, give off a much more scattered, diffused light. And the big, unanswered question is whether that scattered light is anywhere near as effective as the focused laser light used in the studies.
And that leaves us with this really interesting puzzle, doesn't it? The underlying science, this whole photobiomodulation thing, it's real. The potential is absolutely enormous, but right now, today, the market is just flooded with all kinds of devices, and the evidence is often confusing or even biased. So the big question is, how do we tell the real science apart from a really good sales pitch? And that, I think, is the challenge for all of us.